The other reason that I love bringing sacred geometry to the Star Family Wisdom community is because I think it's a great contact modality, right? We don't necessarily connect working with sacred geometry to advanced civilizations or contact experiences, right? But it's a really great way to initiate contact. The Arcturians have made it very clear that studying both sacred geometry and crop circles are signals up to the advanced civilizations that have given us that information that you are interested in expanding your telepathic powers and abilities to communicate with them. And yet, they're really non-threatening, right? You're just drawing a bunch of shapes. The shapes are moving in our subconscious field. They're activating our psychic abilities. All of these latent capacities that we have that we've been a little bit cut off from. When you draw the geometry, when you start to work with the perfect harmonics in the patterns, you begin to align your harmonics. You begin to align your system into states of coherence, and that creates a receptivity to your guidance. And it's sending a signal to those who are aligned with your highest good. And then, of course, my second favorite love, crop circles, are fundamentally based in geometric patterns and encoded with intelligence that are here to help wake us up. Geometry, crop circles, so many things are literally here to activate our dormant DNA, turn on our light bodies, remind us of our star origins, signal basic messages to those civilizations, those communities that are so excited for us to wake up, right? So it's not just sacred geometry. It's like the connection to the cosmos. It's us waking up. That's why I'm so passionate about it. Sacred geometry opens the doors to new realities, new potentials, and that's really what I want to talk to you about today. Like, I've got some fun shapes, I've got some basic patterns, and I just kind of want to entice you into learning more about it. There's a ton of sacred geometry courses. There's 8 modules I created on the Star Family Wisdom page. I really go on, and I'm kind of amazed because like 8 years later, I just don't get tired of this. I love teaching it. I love talking with people about it because it's an activation. It's an activation into our true potential, and that's thrilling. That's just really where it's at. That's what we came to do. So I do have a little PowerPoint, but I'm only going to be jumping in and out of the images just so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. And then I also have some fun sacred geometry toys here because once you start, you can't stop. And I'll just go back and forth between telling you about some of these shapes and hopefully, like I said, just enticing you into the world of exploration. So the first shape I want to talk about is the phi ratio. So when we're talking about geometry, we are shifting our worldview into understanding reality as an energetic frequency, right? What that means is that we're looking at our world, we're looking at this dense material, third dimensional reality, and we're starting to shift gears and understand that it's really just an energetic manifestation of frequency, right? So we're talking about how vibration can be described as frequency. Frequency can be expressed as numbers, right? And then those numbers can be perceived and organized as forms and patterns. So really, when you're studying the forms and patterns of geometry, you're studying the form and pattern of reality represented in geometry. So the first shape I want to talk about is the phi ratio, and this beautiful spiraling pattern that is found throughout nature, throughout the cosmos, throughout our body. We see it on galactic levels, we see it in the flowers and plants around us, and then also we see it in ourselves. We are made of this perfect spiral that is how space organically multiplies or divides itself infinitely. This is a shape that has a particular ratio, which is 1 segment to 1.618. So this isn't a ratio of 1 to 2, it's a ratio of 1 to 1.618. And it's really specific because that number uniquely will continue on infinitely out or contract to more and more infinite minutely scales, right? So this is how we scale out, this is how we scale in. This is actually the geometry that bridges the worlds of the quantum and the cosmological. The other thing about the phi ratio is that, as you'll see, it's got this beautiful spiraling curvature, right? Which represents this divine, feminine, flowing, creative, right-brained element of life. And it is perfectly partnered with this sacred, masculine, structured, linear progression, left brain, complementary form and pattern. And the two of them harmonize. They bring the polarities together in relationship. It's part of why it feels so good. And that's not to create a binary construct. All of us have both the masculine and the feminine within us, right? And so part of what we're looking for is balance of those two energies. And so the phi represents that perfect balance. So you can see the spiral really highlighted, but you can also see the structure behind it. And that structure behind it is called the Fibonacci sequence, right? It's the mathematic complementary proportion to the curving spiral. It's what gives the spiral frame, right? And there's a particular mathematic progression with the Fibonacci sequence. And what it is the first two integers add together to create the third. And what that means, you can see here, is 1 plus 2 equals 3, and then 2 plus 3 is 5, right? 3 plus 5 is 8, and 5 plus 8 is 13, and 8 and 13 is 21. 13 and 21 is 34, and it goes on and on and on. That addition and also the subtraction will never end. Not only is this a harmonic relationship, but the fact that it goes on and on, infinitely on and on to both quantum and cosmological scales really starts to hint at a larger design and orchestration of reality. Here's what I mean by that. This is that equation written out, right? Linear, right to left, 1 and 1 is 2, 1 and 2 is 3, 2 and 3 is 5, 3 and 5 is 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, on and on and on. So we're reading that left to right. Now, fascinatingly enough, you can also read the third column down. As you can see the arrows here, right? 2 and 3 is 5, 3 and 5 is 8, 5 and 8 is 13, 8 and 13 is 21, on down the column. So you can read it right to left. You can read it down on the third column. Check it out. You can also read it down the first column. 1 and 2 is 3, 2 and 3 is 5, all the way down, but it's not limited to that. You can also read the middle column down, and it's the same equation, right? Right to left, 3 columns down. If that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what does. I mean, come on. That is fascinating. Like, who put that together, right? Doesn't it make you start to wonder? Probably our star family, probably a long lineage of galactic family giving us this information and giving us a clue, right? Oh, this is great. I'm talking to star family. I can go all the way, right? This is intelligent design. This doesn't happen randomly, and this certainly is not a tiny little human brain putting this stuff together back however long ago. But as if that's not enough, right? That our human anatomy is made up of this ratio, right? That the galaxies and the plants and our bodies are all made up of this ratio, right? This is just fingertips, but it's literally our entire body made up of this harmonic ratio, right? It's like the tips of our fingers to our elbows, and then so that's the 1, and then the 1.618 is all the way to our shoulder blades, and then it's our heads to our top of our heads to our chin, and then that ratio to your belly button, your eyes, your ears. Check it out, man. You can just trip on this really hard if you want to. But point being, starting to bring your attention to how it's everywhere starts to break down that illusion of separation. Geometry is in everything. That ratio and that spiral is in all of the natural world, somehow, somewhere. So just tune in and turn on. Now, as great as the phi is, it's not the only player. I want to talk to you about a couple of different shapes. I just want to bring your awareness to the patterns that are hidden in plain sight. And I'm going to put in a plug here because we're looking at the geometry. It's fascinating. Oh, starting to connect some dots, right? But you want to draw it, right? So I love to say that sacred geometry holds the keys to the universe, and drawing it turns the key. So, tiny little form of encouragement to consider that this stuff is actually fun to draw, and when you draw it, you're bringing the 2D into the 3D, and you're activating your entire system, and you're getting your consciousness turned on. All right, let's keep going. So another pattern that I want to bring your awareness to is the hexagon, and that hexagonal pattern is really the fundamental structure for sacred geometry and the seed of life and the flower of life. It's called the seed of life because these 7 circles are basically the geometric pattern to everything. It's called the Genesis pattern, it's called the germ of life, and literally, if you know how to draw the seed of life, you can access the entire structural patterning of the universe. So the flower of life is also another pattern that is indicative of intelligent design. Here's what I mean when I say the seed of life is fundamental to everything, right? We are the seed of life. Again, just like with the phi, the first circles and cell divisions of the seed of life mirror the initial bifurcations in our cellular developments, right? We are biologically represented by this geometry in the seed of life, right? And so when you're drawing this, when you're simply interacting with these 7 circles, you are activating yourself. You're activating your biology and many, many, many other layers. Right here, this is part of what suggests some larger architecture. You know, this is not random, right? This is intelligent design. Here's another reason that I suggest a larger consciousness providing the geometry. It's everywhere. There are very few civilizations that do not include sacred geometric art or principles or references. You know, and how did that happen? Like, how did collectively we all understand this universal symbol as culturally significant, right? Here's an example, right? These are the food dogs of the Forbidden City in Beijing. But this isn't unique to the Forbidden City. There are food dogs everywhere in Eastern culture where the food dog literally is protecting some kind of significant wisdom tradition of a culture. And the food dog has his paw on a 3rd dimensional representation of the flower of life, right? Very common, not unique to the Forbidden City. There are examples after examples of reference to this powerful shape in sacred sites and temples everywhere around the planet. So we've got this universality, and we've got some fundamental shapes that I'm showing you are really everywhere, hopefully with the end result that you start to notice them more and more and start to question how that's possible. Like, why is it that those shapes are everywhere in everything? And then what does that mean? And then, oh my God, your reality can possibly unravel quickly. But the cool thing about the geometry is it gives you a structure to anchor to as it unravels and recreates your reality based on universal principles of unity, abundance, interconnectedness, and the ability to thrive in your life. It's a massive shift. Basically, you've got these fundamental principles. You've got the sphere, the circle, you've got triangles, tetrahedrons, you've got pentagons, hexagons, and all sorts of polygons, and they give the building blocks for the sacred geometry. You've now seen the seed of life as a hexagonal pattern that leads into the flower of life, which is a hexagonal pattern. And now I want to show you a brief glimpse about our electromagnetic field. The invitation is for expansion. The geometry can show you its potential, and it will reflect back your consciousness and what you're ready for. So it can take you as far as you want to go, and it responds gently to your consciousness and your readiness. This is a kind process. You know, you hear a lot about contact stories and experiences that are just cosmic 2x4s. You know, my progression has been really gentle. Working with sacred geometry, my own evolution from art to teaching to advanced civilizations has been over a bunch of years. And the geometry, the structure, held me through that transition of unraveling and putting back together. So, back to our electromagnetic field. Everything that's alive and living has an electromagnetic field. We have an output and an input of energy and information. It's this beautiful flow, which is called a toroidal field, this input and this output, and this relationship of our own energy with the universal energy, with everybody's energy, and it's this alive interface with everything. Now, the thing is this toroidal field is clearly a three-dimensional form, and every living thing has an electromagnetic field, right? So when you begin to tap into the geometry of the toroidal field, which looks like this, and it's this perfect relationship of information exchange. Now, the thing is, you can draw that, right? You can actually very easily draw your toroidal fields. How do you do that? With the seed of life. Look at that. Come on, that is so cool. Seriously, it all breaks down to the circle, right? So when you draw 7 of them, you come up with the fundamental principles of reality. Literally, though, drawing this shape by itself and then doubling it over on top of itself, that is what gets you to this. So I want to give you the briefest overview of Metatron's cube. This is a geometry that has so much information. It almost does it an injustice to try to summarize Metatron's cube in a couple minutes, but hopefully it'll give you the idea that there is so much more to look into. So this is Metatron's cube, and part of why it's significant is because it's based in the seed of life. And I want to show you that progression, right? Because all of the geometry is related. Again, it's back to that interconnected principle. This fantastic shape starts with 7 circles. So you can see how there's a progression through the seed of life up over to the flower of life, which is a whole other conversation. And then through the flower of life, down over to Metatron's cube, right? They're all related, and the significance of Metatron's cube is that it contains the platonic solids. These are 5 shapes that adhere to 3 criteria. These are the only 5 shapes that do. The criteria is that all of the faces of the geometries are the same shape, all of the internal angles in the geometries are the same, and that if you were to place the geometry in a circle, it would touch the inner points equidistantly. So these are the 3 criteria of the 5 platonic solids, and they are the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the hexahedron or cube, the icosahedron, and the dodecahedron. The main reason that these shapes are important is because they represent the 5 elements of our physical and non-physical reality. Most of us were told about 4 elements, right? Fire, air, earth, and water. We were not necessarily taught about ether, the 5th element, the dodecahedron. That is space, chi, prana, energy. That is 99.99999% of our reality. We were taught about the 0.0000001% of the known elements of our reality, right? So we've been missing some information. Many ancient wisdom traditions have known about ether and harnessing the energy of the basic life force, but some of us are just catching up. So when you begin to work with these shapes, you are activating your relationship with the elements, particularly the dodecahedron. You're beginning to develop a relationship or deepen a relationship with energy, with space. And there really are lifetimes worth of studies in these shapes. So I want to take a minute and tell you a little bit more about the platonic solids, but I want to tell you that they are really, really fun to just have around. They have their own energetic, and by having toys and tools and drawing them, you're bringing alive those elements, right? So my particular favorite is the dodecahedron, and it's part of how I've created an awareness of my energetic reality. Got a long way to go. That's true. It is so much fun to play with these things because it activates and triggers very old parts of our psyche. Back to the solids. Here you can see how the platonic solids fit into Metatron's cube. right? You've got the tetrahedron on the top left, cube in the center top. On the top right is the icosahedron. Bottom right is the octahedron. Bottom center is the dodecahedron. On the left are two tetrahedrons inverted to create the star tetrahedron. And this is a very important shape because it is the geometric pattern of our light body. It is known as our Merkaba. Mer being light, Ka spirit, Ba body, right? Our Merkaba, star tetrahedron, Star of David. So much symbolism in this geometry that originates in the seed of life, progresses to the flower of life, turns into Metatron's cube, and when worked with, can activate your light body. If we could activate our light body, if we had that ancient wisdom, we could travel the universe. We can ditch our physical form. We can journey in through wormholes to anywhere we want to go. So that's part of why this information is so important. It can lead to your liberation. It can lead to transcendence of this physical form, but not by death, in conscious waking ability to traverse the universe. Right? You get the implications of that? That is wild. So I've been a hardcore fan of the star tetrahedron for a long time. This is usually part of a costume that I wear anywhere because I just want everybody to know my galactic status. Still have a long way to go in terms of activating my personal light body. I do it in the dream time. Point being, you start with the seed of life, you get to the flower of life, you get to Metatron's cube, you activate your light body. Then you're talking with your galactic community, right? Then you're up to the ship. No need for transport. You just get yourself right there by activating your consciousness and supercharging your light body. Simple. So the star tetrahedron is going to lead us into some very exciting places with a few more shapes. This is a single star tetrahedron. We're going to look at how the flower of life contains 64 tetrahedrons. Fundamental geometry of space-time. Let's go. So just to break it down, here's your seed of life. Here's how the star tetrahedron breaks down in the geometry. And then, if you look at the flower of life, right, here's a three-dimensional representation of the star tetrahedron. Here's the geometry of your light body contained and expressed within the flower of life. This is the pure two-dimensional version of the flower of life that is so beautiful. I never get tired of it. Isn't that just spectacular? So, two-dimensional version of the flower of life, which is truly a three-dimensional shape, right? It's 64 spheres packed together, and these spheres have a structure inside. They are made of a tetrahedral structure. I like to call it the bones of the geometry. And it looks like this. So this is the fundamental structure of the flower of life, and it is called the 64-star tetrahedron. And this is a 64-star tetrahedron, right? I won't be offended if you just stare at the geometry. See if you can watch when it just flips. Geometry toys, highly addictive, fabulously activating. Highly recommend checking one out. I want to show you this tiny video that breaks apart the tetrahedrons. And here's the thing, it just keeps getting so much more exciting. It's not just about the 64-star tetrahedron. It has to do with what's inside the 64. It's a shape called the vector equilibrium, and it is a geometry of perfect balance. So you take all the tetrahedrons off, and what's left is the cube octahedron, otherwise known as the vector equilibrium. It has two names. It's called the vector equilibrium because all of the vectors, essentially the lines, are of equal equilibrium width, right? They are equal length. And what that creates is this perfectly balanced shape with this point of singularity. And this point is where physics and metaphysics meet, right? So in physics, this is the point of singularity. It's a black hole. It's a source of infinite energy. And you can tap this geometry and you can access infinite sources of energy. If you really grok how this shape contains the geometry of free energy, when you start to look at the possibility of an infinite source of energy, you change all of reality, right? It's part of why this hasn't been so available, because if you have an abundant source of energy, you have no more fighting, you have no illusion of limited resources. You shift immediately into a reality of abundance, of interconnectivity, of thriving, and unity and harmony and love and all of the beautiful expressions that human beings are capable of, right? Right now, we're in this density where we believe that we're fighting for limited resources, we're fighting each other. There's tragic suffering on this planet. And I do not ever go into why the intelligence and power of geometry has been obscured, but perhaps, given the fact that it could shift our worldview so radically, you can put two and two together. That being said, it can be used to influence our psyche for divisive purposes. It can also be used to influence our psyche for unifying purposes. It's a little sobering. I get pretty excited and worked up about it. But the bottom line is it's very powerful information. So I mentioned that this is where physics and metaphysics meet, right? You've got this infinite source of energy point. Physicists call it the singularity. In the world of metaphysics and spiritual practice, it is the point of stillness. It is that inner vision, that quiet, centered spaciousness that is at the heart of the vector equilibrium. This is the place of equilibrium, whether it's in one discipline or another, any field of study. This is the harmonizing force. This is the place where everything comes together. Through so many of these geometries, you're expanding your consciousness to include far greater intelligence than what we've been led to believe we're capable of. And I'll give you an example. I've mentioned this before, but it was really actually life-changing for me as well. I had a remarkable woman in a class one time, and she was told that she would be able to access her deceased husband through drawing sacred geometry. And that's an extraordinary claim, and I was up for it. The geometry is up for it. And it was the last class in the series, and we drew the vector equilibrium. And she literally went home, started drawing it, and made contact with her husband. And very much in like a mediumship way, where she, in drawing the geometry, she activated her psychic abilities. The geometry touches our energy body. It touches the subtle sensory systems. And she connected with those through the geometry. And then she was able to connect with her husband on the other side and actually have a very powerful healing because he had died in a very traumatic accident. So the implications for working with geometry, what if it was that she was touching that point of singularity, that access to all sorts of different dimensional realities, right? What if it's a portal? What if it's a threshold into other worlds? Infinitely fascinating stuff. So that geometry, drawing that geometry changed her life. Drawing sacred geometry, I'm not even going to say can, it will change your life. With a caveat, it will attract what you need to grow, right? Sometimes that's a little bumpy, but again, the geometry provides the structure to hold you through the transformation. I speak from experience. I mean, that's the truth, right? Is that the geometry has completely helped me and my life expand into someone who wears a star tetrahedron on their head, has led me to a miraculous life of sharing the intelligence of sacred geometry, drawing arts, and expressing deeper and deeper manifestations of the intelligence that geometry contains. One last shape to really bring home my underlying motivation for why I'm sharing this, right? We're going to get down to a simple shape called the Vesica Pisces. It's two circles, but these two circles are some of the most potent geometry. So this shape is called the Vesica Pisces. And this is really about two entities coming together to create a third potential. You could look at this as male-female principles coming together to create a portal of infinite potential, right? This is the harmonizing of energies. This is the shape that originally represented the divine feminine portal that births new realities. It was considered a fundamentally feminine geometry. Then the geometry was used to shift our consciousness towards a masculine paradigm into a patriarchy. If you look at a lot of cultural symbolism, religious iconography, It incorporates this shape that touches on our psyche in primal ways. The unconscious domain of our psyche uses geometric symbols and motifs to communicate with our conscious selves. So Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about the fact that 95% of our reality is governed by our subconscious programming, right? Subconscious programming includes geometric persuasion for messaging and imprinting. If you begin to tap into the geometry of your subconscious mind, you are claiming more conscious awareness of reality. The geometry is so powerful, it's been used to influence us for various agendas. We can start to use it for our own personal agenda, ascension, transformation, liberation. I am here in service to the higher potential that it holds. So I invite you to step into any kind of curiosity, step into a calling, an intuition, or a knowing that the next level of your expansion could be activated through sacred geometry. I would love to hang out, love to play, not just on this 3D realm, right? You're watching this because you're part of Star Family Wisdom. We're talking about getting in touch with your family. Life is better when they're around. For me personally, I will say that. Doors have opened for me. Connections have been made. Higher aspects of my consciousness, various aspects of myself that are on other galactic star systems, that are on starships, that are of part of other galaxies. I have opened to the possibility of deconstructing the construct of time. Because if you sit and play with the Tesseract for a minute, which is an 8-fold hypercube, 4th dimensional geometry, you can't help but learn that we can bend space-time and that dimensional travel is right here, right now, and that everything is right here, right now. There is no such thing as linear time. It's all happening simultaneously, and you can start to jump into different timelines and different aspects of yourself and understand yourself as a true energetic manifestation of source consciousness. That is a mouthful, and thank you so much for joining me on the ride. Be in touch, check out everything, use your intuition when you are researching things. I would love to guide you into the most supportive information. A lot of my courses have resources and ways to continue developing your intuitive intelligence that brought you here in the first place. Many blessings, so much love.